morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, March 18th, 2014. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz.
Here.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Here.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Here.
Councilmember Lewis.
Here.
Councilmember McGuire.
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the March 4th City Council meeting and the March 11th City Council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, proclamation recognizing April as Water Conservation Month.
Whereas water is a basic and essential need of every living creature, and whereas the St. Johns River Water Management District is working together with the state of Florida, other water management districts, local governments, and water supply utilities to increase awareness about the importance of water conservation, and whereas April is typically a dry month in Florida when water demands are increased, and whereas the St. Johns River Water Management District encourages and supports water conservation through various educational programs and special events, and whereas every business, industry, school, and citizen can help by conserving water and thus promote a healthy economy and community, and whereas the St. Johns River Water Management District is calling upon each citizen and business to help protect our precious resource by practicing water conservation measures and becoming more aware of the need to conserve water. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, does hereby declare the month of April as Water Conservation Month. Adopted March 18, 2014. Signed, John Netz, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Mayor, if I could.
Please.
On Friday, the City of Palm Coast, the St. Johns Water Management District, the Flagler Home Builders Association, and several other partners are holding a class for contractors. Good timing with the April Conservation Month. It's primarily focused on Florida Water Star and installing Florida Water Star techniques in new construction. So if you need more information about that, call the city, Denise Bevan, and she can get you that information for the Friday's class.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the home builders for doing their part in helping to make us a water-wise community. Agenda item number 3, presentation of the Plant Excellence Award, and this is one I'll tackle.
I hope this is not about growing dope.
Uh-oh. Here they come. Here they come.
The experts.
This is the 2013 Plant Operations Excellence Award. This award is based on such factors as staff training and certification, safety and emergency preparedness, outstanding plant appearance, record keeping, conservation, and customer relations. Palm Coast Utility Division is the only Florida utility to receive this year's award in the DEP's Northeast 18-county region. This is really a tribute to the excellent job you gentlemen are doing. Congratulations. Who's going to take the plaque? Say a few words? Sure.
Mayor, City Council, Mr. Landon, Jim Hogan, Water Operations Manager for the Public Works Utility Division. With me here today are the chief operators from our 3 water treatment facilities. Donnie Holcomb, Water Treatment Plant number 1, Fred Greiner, Water Plant number 2, and Peter Roussel, Water Plant number 3. These guys are the folks that have really instilled a quality work ethic in their employees and staff, operations and maintenance staff. And I really think what sets our utility apart is the great amount of pride that the operations and maintenance staff take in the performance of their duties, especially in the production of quality drinking water for our citizens. And we are greatly honored to accept this award on their behalf today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Agenda item number 4, second reading of an ordinance for a flume, a future land use map amendment for approximately 4.1 acres of city-owned lands adjacent to Seminole Woods Parkway. Mr. Reichman.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan. As previously amended pursuant to Chapter 163 Florida statutes, amending the future land use map or flume designation for 4.1 more or less acres of certain real property from agriculture and timberlands, which is the Flagler County future land use designation, to institutional, which is the City of Palm Coast future land use designation, as described in more detail in the legal description, which is an exhibit to this ordinance. This provides for conflicts, ratification of prior acts, codification, severability, and effective date, Mr. Mayor. This is a legislative matter.
Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is the second reading of this housekeeping item. It is just a monitoring well owned by the city. It currently has the flume and zoning designation of the old county designation before it was annexed into the city. This designates it as public, semi-public, and there's no development potential here whatsoever, so it truly is just a housekeeping item. Second reading, we're recommending approval. Bo is here to answer any questions you may have.
Council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting from the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 4? See no one approach the podium. We'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire.
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is the continuation of this in a sense. This is an ordinance of a zoning map amendment for the same parcel of property. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This quasi-judicial matter is titled, An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map as established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code. Amends the zoning designation for approximately 4.1 more or less acres of certain real property from Plan Unit Development, or PUD, which is a Flagler County designation, to public and semi-public, or PSP, the City of Palm Coast zoning designation, as described in more detail in the legal description, which is an exhibit to this ordinance. This ordinance provides for conflicts, ratification of prior acts, codification, severability, and effective date. Mayor, if there's been any, council, if there's been any ex parte communication since the first reading of this ordinance, those should be disclosed.
Any
given
ex
this
parte
quasi-judicial.
communications to be disclosed?
No.
Mr. Landon.
Comments that I made on the previous item are relevant to this one. This is, as Mayor, you indicated, just the zoning portion of this land use action. We have nothing new.
Seeing no council questions, again, we'll open the meeting to the public, and from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 5. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, go back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire.
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, an ordinance officially naming or renaming certain street segments at the request of Flagler County Emergency Services. Mr. Reichman.
Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, officially renaming or designating certain street segments, renaming a segment of Belterra Parkway to Old Belterra Parkway, renaming a segment of Arrowhead Drive to New Water Oak Drive, renaming a segment of Pine Lakes Parkway to Pine Lakes Parkway North, and officially naming an extension of Pine Lakes Parkway as Pine Lakes Drive, as graphically depicted in Exhibit A, providing for updating and distribution of the city map, providing for replacement of the affected street signs, and providing for conflict, severability, and effective date.
Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is an ordinance to clean up a couple of, or a few of the street names. It came from our 911 center, our communications center at the county. Just to clarify the record, it doesn't actually change anybody's address. Bo is going to kind of go through the details very quickly, as it's really another housekeeping item.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Once again, this is a cleanup item at the request of Flagler County Emergency Services in the interest of public safety. Just quickly go through each of the street name changes. Starting here, this is renaming the post-realignment Belterra Parkway to Old Belterra Parkway. There are no residents or addresses on this street. The next one is Arrowhead Drive to New Water Oak Drive. And once again, New Water Oak Drive is the continuation of the street, so there's once again no addresses or businesses located on this portion. This is just for consistency that the whole road is named New Water Oak Drive. The third street name change is Pine Lakes North, currently known as Pine Lakes Parkway, but as far as residents know, and the E911 addressing is Pine Lakes Parkway North. Once again, this will have no effect on businesses or addresses, business or residents' addresses as they currently know them. And then finally, Pine Lakes Drive, from Pine Lakes Parkway to Pine Lakes Drive here. And once again, no businesses or address or residents will be affected by this address change.
Council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meetings in public. And from the public, wish to be heard on agenda item number 6. Seeing none approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting. Back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval of agenda item number 6.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7, a resolution amending the City of Palm Coast fund balance policy. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is actually a proposal that our auditors requested that we bring to you. We've had some new funds, we've had some changes in the GASB. Chris can tell you what that stands for. And we have a couple of funds that we don't meet our policies. So Chris has put together a policy that would be consistent to address all those things. He's going to make the presentation for you and outline a couple of options for you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is a repeat of the presentation that we had at the March 11th workshop. Our fund balance policy, the purpose of the policy is to basically establish a level of working capital for each of our funds, both operating and non-operating funds. This working capital or fund balance hedges against sudden increases in expenses or decreases in revenues. And the policy also provides guidance for when we should increase or decrease the level of fund balance within the various funds. Why would you update your fund balance policy? Well, the biggest one is probably changes in GASB terminology. GASB, being the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, seems to be on a mission to change the terminology of everything we've known for the past 50 years. So that happened in fiscal year 13. You could also have changes in operations or changes in goals of specific funds that would require a modification to the fund balance policy. If you create new funds, you'd need to create a fund balance policy for that fund. And also, if you had existing funds that it was proper to have a fund balance policy for, you would want to go ahead and put that in place. So the proposed changes to our current policy is just that one of them is simply terminology. The term net assets with GASB has changed to net position. Net assets is used extensively in the fund balance policy. Tennis center and golf course operations, which we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, and also to establish a policy for our internal service funds. The tennis and golf course funds. The auditors had suggested we take a look at this and consider policy changes. When we initially wrote the policy for these funds, was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. How we're actually dealing with these funds and with these operations is different than what was originally thought of back then. So we basically came up with 2 options to deal with what the auditor suggested we take a look at. The first is to eliminate the minimum level of fund balance required in those funds. In other words, right now with the golf and tennis funds, we're transferring revenues as needed from the general fund to support those operations. By having some minimum level required in those funds, we're simply taking general revenues and parking them there for no real use. And that's really the crux of the current fund balance policy. We'd be taking tax revenues, setting them aside, and just having them sit in the bank and not really be used better in different places where the city needs it. So option one is simply to eliminate the minimum requirement and then just support those funds as needed. Option two is to instead just incorporate into the general fund part of the Parks and Recs budget, the golf course and the tennis facility, so that it would be treated no different than other facilities such as the pool, the Indian Trail Sports Complex, or any of our park and recreation facilities. With our internal services fund, our fleet fund, at the time when we created the policy, we were really struggling with how to set the right policy for that fund, but in the interim, we've come up with a good balance of how to set a minimum fund balance policy. And in our case, what we're doing is we're looking at the total amount of replacements that are within the fleet fund, coming up with the average life of those and saying, okay, our minimum fund balance really needs to be the estimated amount that we're going to replace in any one year. So the recommendation is to actually set a minimum amount of fund balance in the fleet fund. And this is consistent with our current practice. We've been doing this, we just haven't had it documented the last few years. And then with our self-insured health fund, of course, our health insurance is self-insured. There's two primary numbers that actuaries provide us relating to our health insurance fund. One is the maximum worst-case scenario plan cost. The other is the expected plan cost based on our history and demographics of our group. We're suggesting that we have a minimum fund balance of 50% of that difference. And again, that just helps hedge against unusual claims years or any issues that might arise. It gives us a little bit of additional cash flow if needed within that fund. And again, we've been doing this really since the self-insured health fund was created several years ago, so it is consistent with the current practice of what we're doing today. So before you is the resolution for the fund balance policy update. The big question really with the tennis center and the golf course fund is which option City Council at this point prefers.
Council questions? Mr. Lewis.
Chris, in discussing this at the last meeting, I think I had a preference for option one. Option one to me is cleaner and it's as needed. And there's no pressure, as would be in option two, on the recreation's budget. There's no pressure on that. So I would lean towards option one because of it's more efficient, in my opinion.
Other council questions?
Chris, good morning. The transfers that we currently have been doing into the golf and tennis funds, they come from the general fund, but what portion of general fund?
They come from the park and recreation budget.
Thank you.
Other council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting for the public, and from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 7. Please give us your name and limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. What is the expenses that are coming out for the pool and the Indian Trails complex? I mean, is it comparable with the golf course and the tennis courts?
We'll get you an answer, Jack. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting to back to council. But first, what is the, if I understand Jack's question, what do we put into, what do we subsidize, what are the costs of maintenance of Indian Trails? What are the costs of the pool over and above revenues compared to the costs over and above revenues of the golf course and the tennis court?
I'm going to let Chris try to address that. And I know we don't separate them out as cost centers, so he's not going to be able to address it directly. But
That's correct. We, with all of our park and recreation facilities, Currently, we don't track, for instance, what the cost specifically to maintain Ralph Carter Park is or any of our individual park facilities. We do have some revenues from those facilities, from rentals, things of that nature, but we don't actually have separate P&Ls on each of our parks primarily because a majority of the expenses in those areas are covered by general revenues or tax revenues.
And the same would be true for the pool?
The same would be true for the pool. We do recuperate costs for use of the pool, but it's fairly minimal and would not cover the actual operating costs of the pool.
I guess that's the best we can do at the moment. I'd be curious, though, to see, that's an aging pool with aging equipment. And from my own experience many years ago as the president of the New Jersey Pool Operators Association, I know that costs go up as equipment gets old. Be curious to see what the trend line is there. Are we putting more money in or not? I know we've recently, relatively recently, adopted a policy of closing that pool during the winter months when usage is very, very low and operating costs are extraordinarily high. But be curious to see if Luann can kind of factor out those numbers, just out of curiosity.
Mr. Mayor, we may also have some additional information on that when we look at the 10-year capital plan. That'll be coming up at a workshop in the next couple of weeks. There'll be some information on renovation and replacement costs for the pool included in that.
Good.
Chris, one of the reasons why I think option one is cleaner is because you don't have those concerns since you're only making a contribution as needed. And also, the golf course is going to present or provide us with a P&L. So I think that gives us a better picture of what's going on.
Right, with the golf course and tennis center, since there's a separate management company, we would still get a monthly profit, essentially profit and loss statement on those facilities.
Right.
Mr. Ferguson.
I'm struggling here to understand the benefit to us of making either change, other than the fact that our auditors might be happier and we're more in compliance with the GASB. Is that right? And option one, we keep a minimum balance in the fund that we've set up as a policy. That you think that if it was retained in the general fund, it would be beneficial to us?
Well, to meet the current fund balance policy for the tennis center and golf course fund, we'd have to transfer about $150,000 of tax revenues that would simply sit in the bank and the tennis center and golf course fund and couldn't be utilized for other governmental needs.
Right.
And at this point, since we're funding the golf course and tennis center as needed for any deficiencies in the revenues, to have the money just sit there and not be utilized by the city for more important purposes is really the crux of option one, is saying that doesn't make any sense. Let's just continue to support as needed and not have this requirement that we set this money aside and instead use that money for, where we need it today.
So our auditors would be happier or happy, they wouldn't be any more happy, or would the finance department be any happier with option one or option two?
Correct, as long as we made a change that, more closely resembled how we're actually operating those facilities.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Ferguson, you raised an interesting point during the workshop supporting option one. Option two, as Mr. Carroll pointed out, kind of everything just gets blended together and you don't focus on any particular center.
Right.
Whereas if we maintain option one, as Chris points out, we'll still get our monthly reports from Kemper, but it also stays under closer scrutiny by council. So I'm going to be inclined to support option one also. Any other council questions or comments? Before we approve this resolution, is there consensus on which option to incorporate? Mr. McGuire, do you have
I'm okay with either one. One is fine.
You favor number one, I favor number one. Mr. DiLorenzo?
I'm going to favor number one now, but I think philosophically we're getting a whole lot closer to understanding that these are city amenities and probably should be treated like every other city amenity. But I think keeping it under scrutiny for, closer scrutiny for a little bit longer is okay. So option one's fine.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution incorporating option one as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 8, an appeal request by Agua Construction Company relating to Neighborhood Stabilization Program contractors pre-qualification. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, as you know, we have a grant program here called Neighborhood Stabilization. It's actually a program that allowed the city to apply for grant dollars to help homes that were foreclosed, to get them out of the bank ownership into home ownership. It also had ability to rehab homes, but it was not a city program as much as it was a grant program where the homeowner would contract with someone. But the city had policies that we had to abide by as part of the federal grant criteria. And that was we had to pre-qualify contractors. In other words, a contractor had to meet certain minimum qualifications in order for them to be eligible to be on the list of the contractors that could bid on a project. And then they would contract with those homeowners. We had a contractor who applied to qualify and was determined by staff not to meet minimum qualifications. He's appealed that to me, and I upheld staff's decision. And he's now appealed it to City Council. So that's what this is, to basically take this decision of staff, and he's asked that it be appealed to City Council. We're going to start off with Brian, our purchasing manager, kind of going through how the process works. We would then like to give Mr. Priotti, the person who applied for the appeal, opportunity to state their case. And then Bo, who manages the project, is here to address, exactly why we determined this contractor not to qualify, make minimum qualifications. So, Brian, if you'll take it from here and kind of go through the process for City Council.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. The city was awarded funds for the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, NSP, to purchase and renovate homes for foreclosed or bank-owned properties. In April 2009, we established a pre-qualification process where contractors were required to pre-qualify to be able to submit bids under the federal grant program. Part of that process, we established a pre-qualification process for the contractors. First, the contractors must have pulled 3 permits to build or rehab a minimum of 3 homes within the last 2 years. The application was received by Agua Construction, which indicated no permits were pulled within the last 2 years. Based on those requirements, the pre-qualification process, the application was then denied. Part of the pre-qualification process, we also allowed for a probationary status period for the NSP program. Staff determined that his probationary status was also be denied based on the documents that we received. Agua Construction appealed my request to the city manager as part of the bid protest procedures. The information was then reviewed by the city manager, who also denied Agua Construction's request. Agua Construction requests that Mr. Landon's decision be heard by City Council, and that's the reason that we're here today. And now someone from Agua Construction can speak at this time.
Representative from Agua Construction?
And Mayor, he was noticed about this meeting in time. Yep.
He just came in, Mayor. So.
Okay. Sir, would you come up to the front of the room? Bo will give you a microphone. That works. If it works. Put a battery in it.
It was working.
There we go. All right, sir. You're appealing the city manager's decision to uphold the decision of staff to reject your probationary status as a qualified contractor under the NSP program. We've heard staff presentation. Now would welcome your comments.
First, I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me this opportunity.
And would you give us your name for the record, please?
Daniel Priotti.
Thank you.
You guys all have a copy of this, I believe?
Tell me what it is.
The appeals letter I turned in with exhibits
Yes.
explaining, I'd just like to know where's my direct involvement? I'm not attached to that corporation. The way I see it, I'm kind of asking how, if I'm not a president or a CFO of a company, how their complaints are being held against me.
That's the essence of your...
That, and on an email, Jay Marr was asked about Daniel Priotti, Agua Construction, and yet a complaint from 8 years ago was brought up against another contractor.
Who is this other contractor?
Alberto Emilio Priotti.
Is that in relation to you?
It's my father.
Oh, okay. All right, so the essence of your... All right, as I understand it, there are 3 criteria for qualification. 1, you must be free of any substantiated complaints or violations during the past 2 years.
I do not.
You must maintain a consistent record of past inspections with no lengthy constructions during the past 2 years. And you must have pulled permits and built or rehabbed at least 3 homes in the last 2 years. You meet all 3 of those qualifications?
No, but I meet the probationary status.
Okay. Brian, could you tell me a little bit about probationary status? What's involved? What are the criteria?
Yes, sir. Probationary status would allow contractors to be able to come in and do work for the city. However, they would have had to have some previous work experience under their company. Right now, Mr. Agua Construction has not pulled any permits, so we're not able to verify his type of work or what he can do for having people and having contractors into private citizens' homes. And right now, if he was able to provide us with that type of work that he's done, we would be able to give him the probationary status, period.
Mr. Priotti, how long has Agua Construction been in existence?
I started the company August 2nd, 2013, last year, and I've pulled 1 permit so far this year, and I'm in the process of pulling a couple more.
Okay, so your company is about a year old. You said August of 13?
Yes, August of last year.
Brian, how does that square with our requirement for probationary status?
Maybe if I could, this is where Bo really comes in, because he's the one that manages the program and made the decision initially. Maybe, Bo, you could explain the process and qualification, please.
Okay. Just a little bit of background about the Neighborhood Stabilization Program and how it works. Brian and both Mr. Landon covered, but essentially it's a buyer-driven program that provides grant funding to homeowners to purchase and rehabilitate a foreclosed home. The rehabilitation process is managed by the City of Palm Coast, meaning that we manage the pre-qualification process to ensure that the contractors working in applicants' homes are not only licensed, but also qualified to undertake the work. While the homeowner and contractor are the primary parties to the rehabilitation contract, the city serves as the agent and manages the rehabilitation process. While the city is not a direct party in the rehabilitation contract, any failure by the contractor to perform the work and later on to address warranty issues, which can sometimes go from 1 to 5 years later, ultimately will result in the city being blamed. That's exactly why we have a pre-qualification process to ensure that licensed and qualified contractors are procured for this program, but also that those licenses and qualifications are documented. At the initial application, Agua Construction did not meet the minimum qualifications for participation in the program of having pulled 3 permits, which has been discussed. Should Agua Construction meet those requirements later on, it's more than welcome to reapply for the program and participate in future programs. This is exactly why the application was denied. In reviewing the probationary status, which the mayor raised, we looked at the other information in the application to demonstrate experience. In the application for Agua Construction, it listed Priotti Construction as the main component of that bulk of the construction experience, and also listed multiple addresses where work was managed and subcontractors were managed on projects. In reviewing those addresses and that experience, we did contact Jay Marr and Barbie Bembry to look up Flagler County Contracting Review Board documents and minutes related to those addresses and the experience. After reviewing those records, it was determined by staff to deny that for probationary status. Ultimately, Agua Construction, if they're able to pull 3 permits free of complaints as this new company, they'd be more than happy to reapply for this program or future programs in the future. But just to be clear, this is not work being done on city homes. This is private homeowners' homes, and ultimately, if we procure or select contractors that do not meet those qualifications and the work is at issue, then ultimately, I'm sure the city will be blamed for that. So once again, in reviewing probationary status, we looked at the construction experience of the contractor himself. So that was our determination.
Mr. Priotti, that something raised your interest in that comment, so go ahead.
As an employee of a company, I have no financial control over what happens. The complaints that were brought up from the city...
Let me see if I understand. As part of your work experience, you're claiming employment by Priotti Construction, which was your father's company?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that by virtue of being an employee, you didn't have fiduciary responsibility, you didn't have, it was your father who carries the brunt of all liability, responsibility, so on and so forth.
Correct. If you look at the complaints that were brought up from the city to my father, there was no complaints from the homeowners against us, no creditors coming after us. The pools were complete. They just did not have the final. And at the time, my father didn't have the money to reopen the company, pay for insurance. I could not go and do all that because I wasn't the CFO of that company. I mean, me as a supervisor, the job got complete.
Okay.
But I guess my main concern is this. On an email from Boo, it says, Jay, could you indicate whether or not the contractor had any complaints or violations with the state or local contractor review board? I'm a new company. I didn't have any of that. He sends him a complaint against my father from 8 years ago. That just sounds a little fishy to me.
I see 2 issues here. The issue of your father's company and complaints against that, and your defense that I was an employee and not responsible, that I can understand. What I do have a concern about is, as Bo points out, under this program, a homeowner applies, we agree X amount of dollars we spent rehabbing it, we put out bids, contractors bid, I'm assuming we take the low bid, give that information to the homeowner, who then contracts with that low bidder. In my mind, there would be a presumption that if the city is presenting me with this name, they must know good. The analogy I use, if you go up to Jacksonville and get on a bus, you don't ask to see the bus driver's license. You assume, because it's a city bus, he must be properly licensed. I would think the same assumption would apply here. If we are giving your name as the low bidder to a homeowner, I think they would have a presumption that we have pre-qualified this individual. So the question that I have, pre-qualification or probationary status, says, well, you haven't met the 3 required permits for building or rehabbing. Do you have sufficient experience that we could have confidence that you would be able to carry out these programs?
I mean, my father's company was not the only company I worked for. I mean, I've worked for the Stella Group, the Haskell Group, all out of Jacksonville on commercial jobs. I worked for other builders, other subcontractors.
You worked for Haskell?
Excuse me?
You worked for Haskell?
Yes, I was there for a couple weeks under my father. He was a superintendent for Haskell. I was there for a couple weeks. And then that's when I started, before my accident, that's when I started subcontracting here in the local area.
Counsel, I've been doing all the talking.
I have a question.
Mr. Di Lorenzo,
What license do you currently hold? What state license?
Certified general contractor?
But under your new company, or your company, I should say, probably, what type of permits have you pulled so far? You said you've pulled one and you have another one in the pipeline.
I pulled one back in February.
What type of work was it?
It's to build a pool.
Okay. And you have another permit coming up?
I do have some work coming up in front of me with some homeowners for the tornado damage.
Okay. All right. And that's all I have right now.
Your Honor.
Mr. Dwyer.
Mr. Priotti, what is the management structure of Agua Construction? Are you the CEO of the company?
Yes, I'm the president, and I have a silent vice president.
So,
partner.
because I'm getting confused, I'm hearing a lot of comments about your father's business and what he did and all that, but as I see it, we're here to talk about whether or not Agua Construction Company, which does not include him.
Had any complaints in the prior 2 years?
Okay, and am I also hearing that the reason you're being disqualified as Agua Construction Company, which is your company, is that you haven't had a chance to do enough jobs to be qualified? Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, so if is it possible that this gentleman's probation could be extended, since he hasn't really had the chance to prove himself under the auspices of his own company and divorced from his father? Is that a possibility?
Not to jump in, but he has not been granted probationary status. I think that's the issue. I think we will all agree that he does not meet the qualifications for general acceptance. There is a provision for a probationary status. If you haven't done the 3 permits that you require, if everything else is in order, you could be granted probationary status. And I'm not sure, Bo, maybe you could help me on this. A house comes along and we've got, I don't know, a new roof to be put on. And we put out requests for bids, and the pre-approved contractors can bid. Can a probationary contractor bid?
For probationary status, generally the limits would be 10 to 15,000 on the amount of work.
Okay, so it's a smaller.
And then also the number of jobs will be limited to 1 until you've proven, that it's without issue.
Give me 1 at a time.
Right, correct.
Well, yeah, that makes good sense. Mr. Lewis.
Could you tell me, in terms of the probationary period for this applicant, has he enough experience or work experience in terms of pools? Pools, I think, is what his concern is, under the probationary period to qualify for that particular category?
Based on, I mean, you're here today to hear the appeal, but based on my review, probationary status was not granted based on the construction experience and the complaints related to that construction experience.
So between the time he established his company and the time he made application, he has not acquired the experience even for probationary?
Well, if he pulls 3 permits free of complaints under Agua Construction, he would be accepted full.
Well, no, let's
board.
skip that part. Let's go just to his probationary period, just for that, because that requires less experience and everything else. So just for that particular category, has he acquired that particular experience necessary to be considered for a probationary license?
It's something that wasn't included in the documentation, and I guess we would look into the permits he pulled and if they were without complaint or without issue.
Let me maybe help a little bit, is that, if this new company, once they pull 3 permits, then they would be qualified. Not probationary or anything else. They would just qualify. But the program does have that minimum qualification. It also has that probationary, if there's unusual circumstances.
See, and therein lies the problem. If you just said, here are the qualifications, 3 jobs without issue, he wouldn't meet that qualification, there's no issue.
Right.
It's this probationary status that is confusing the matter.
Right, exactly. And then in reviewing that, we review the record and our experience with Mr. Priotti, because he can say his father was the owner of the company, but we have direct experience with Mr. Priotti with previous permits, that experience, staff has said that he needs to, it's a new day. We would love for him to be very successful in his new company. The idea is, instead of having him get that experience with a government program, that if it doesn't work, then it's a front page story, to go get the experience, show us that it's a new day, and then come in, reapply, we haven't granted probationary status for anybody. I want to point that out. You know, it's go meet the minimum qualifications, then come see us, and we will put you on the pre-qualification list. It's been how we've operated. So, but you know, he's trying to make his case, and that's up to City Council as to whether or not you think the circumstances warrant special consideration for him.
And question for the attorney. Mr. Reichman, this is an appeal. Is this handled with public participation as well?
It's in the nature of quasi-judicial, so like any other quasi-judicial matter, if there's someone that has an interest in the matter, they certainly can participate. There's recent case law that makes a distinction. I think we had a discussion about this recently about a participant versus a party. Obviously, the parties in this case are two. There's two parties. One is the city staff, and the other is Mr. Priotti. Those are the folks that are central to this. But yes, if someone that is not a party has something to say that would be relevant, that would be of substantial competent evidence, certainly that would be something that this council, sitting in its quasi-judicial capacity, could consider. It doesn't have to, but I mean, if someone has something that if it was a witness or someone that has something to add, that would be appropriate.
Okay. Continue with council questions.
I guess my concern is how did you get this this experience as a probationary person other than getting a government contract? I would imagine that the city is looking at, and I don't know, is looking at the fact that you get this experience from non-government work, and then you come and use that as your reasons for requesting probationary status.
Actually, if he gets work and he pulls 3 contracts, it's not probationary status, he would qualify.
But I guess the question is, what is probationary status? I mean, how do you
And I'm
define
looking
it?
for something in the documentation that describes probationary status.
Right, and it's not in the pre-bid documents. That information was put together by the consultant, Guardian, and talking to them, probationary status is generally bids less than $15,000, and you're only allowed to have 1 at a time, whereas the regular program allows you to have 2 at a time.
See, it's a matter of law from a standpoint of how you're supposed to make your decision today. If this gentleman and his company had, as been said many times, had 3 contracts and pulled 3 permits, we're not here today because he would meet the standards. We're done. And so that's black and white. But this program has an additional layer, and that's this probationary. And it's not black and white. Then it's a matter of judgment. It's a matter of looking at the history and the totality of the circumstances and determining whether it's appropriate for this company to be given probationary status. That's what you're here on today, obviously. That's what Mr. Priotti's here on today. He contends that based upon the totality of the circumstances, looking at his history and judging, in his opinion, and is what I'm hearing him say, looking at his situation, the history of the other company should not be held against him, and that he believes that was a or the factor in the refusal of the city staff to give him probationary status. Whereas the city staff is saying, well, you know, we're following the guidelines that are appropriate for the NSP program, and looking at the totality of the circumstances and looking at the purpose of probationary status, it would not be appropriate to grant this applicant, the appellant, probationary status at this time. So it's something that you have to look at all of the factors and work them together. And I'll defer to Bo, but I think that includes how much, if he doesn't meet the strict guidelines, which would be the 3, how many does he have, what kind are they, what are their amounts, how did they go? And then you look beyond that and look at what is this gentleman's experience, work experience, and what is the history of that work experience. And I'm assuming that's what staff, and if I'm wrong, then Bo and Brian will correct me, but that's my understanding of the record before you this morning.
Mayor.
How many approved contractors are there now? And how much business is available to Mr. Priotti if he were to become qualified?
Right.
And lastly, this question's for Mr. Priotti, is how dependent is the success of your business be related to becoming qualified for this program?
The program started in April 2009. Since that time, we've probably pre-qualified 40, 50 contractors.
How many?
40 to 50. Some of them go out of business. Some of them bid once and determine that they can't get to the low bid, so they drop out. Essentially, the neighborhood stabilization program is wrapping up. There are no longer any rehab bids going to be bid or awarded. So essentially, this program is finished as far as this program goes.
To answer your question, the program is almost over. I wanted to come to you guys on just question as to why Jay brought up complaints from 8 years ago against my father when he was asked specifically about me, the contractor. And then another thing, when I turned this letter in February 6th, they have me on video turning it in, yet it didn't get marked in until February 13th. I have some concerns that my city's being ran inadequately, and I would like to know, I guess, what can we fix to make things like this not happen again?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Mr. DiLorenzo.
Bo, did I hear, I want to get to the root of this. Former company, previous employment, new company. So, but did I hear you say that on the application or the pre-qualification application that specific project addresses were listed and then there was issues with those, or did through your process the previous company, because there was previous experience, you looked up those, and then there was issues with some specific addresses. So which way did it go?
Right. This was our first application that we reviewed for probationary status, the only one. When we received the application, we asked for additional information, a resume, and qualifications in order to review the probationary status, as it was a new contractor that had not pulled permits as a new company. So we wanted to ensure that, once again, not only licensed, but qualified. The bulk of construction experience listed on the initial resume presented by the applicant listed Priotti Construction, Priotti Pools, and I think it was about 10 years of the construction experience. On that resume, it also listed, I believe, 4 addresses, and I believe 2 of which, and the process was I essentially sent that information to Barbie Bembry, the permitting supervisor, to confirm whether or not this company had pulled permits. And then secondly, I sent it to Jay Marr, who handles business licensing cases in the city and also contractor licenses cases in the city, to find out if there were any issues with the experience listed or the addresses listed in the application. And coming back, of course, were the documents that are in your package, and they're right there. So that was the basis for my decision to deny probationary status.
Question. Bo, looking at the information that we were provided, I didn't find anything against Dan, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The information I did see was against his father. The work experience is places where he has worked during those years. So to me, that gives him some sort of hands up on being a probie. He's given an opportunity to prove himself. So I find that short of having a definition of probationary status, I can't see why this person can't be given the opportunity to apply under that particular category.
Mr. DiLorenzo.
Mr. Priotti, you're the new license holder? The license is in your name?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The previous experience that you listed when you were asked for more information, can you help him with the microphone? What role in the company did you hold they have the microphone for you. What role in the company did you hold for those jobs that you listed as previous experience? What was your?
I'm not sure what addresses they're talking about.
6 Lighton, 6 Landon, 213 Boulder Rock, 34 East Diamond.
I'm sorry, I got you. I thought he was talking about the complaint against my father. I pretty much managed putting the subcontractors together, calling the suppliers, getting the material.
Were you in the field?
Once in a while, I would go out there.
Okay.
I had no control over the financial aspect of it whatsoever.
Often in a construction company, there will be someone that will prepare the permits, submit the permits, call in for inspections. Was that ever your role?
Yes.
But these 4, or at least these 4, was the issue. I think I have to ask Bo this question. Bo, was the issue here with not calling in a final exam, a final inspection?
Those are houses.
I'm looking through the records now. Yeah, it was not getting the CO, and I understand there was also unfinished work as part of the permits. This was the only, and I realize you're questioning the involvement of the contract you have before you, but this is the only contractor's license that permitting privileges were revoked in Flagler County. So, the involvement as far as the application was concerned, and once again, grants are all about what's documented, what's writing. Managing the subcontractors, estimating, scheduling, and coordinating between investors, realtors, and owners. Regards to those four homes listed there.
That, to me, sounds like business management rather than construction. But Mr. Priotti commented just recently that one of his concerns was how the city conducted this review, that he submitted a paper on such and such a date, and it wasn't reviewed. Mr. Landon, could you comment on why there's a gap?
Well, as I understand, and Brian, you can probably help better in this, is that Mr. Priotti submitted his appeal with the building permit at the same time, and so that all the documents with the building permit went to the building department.
No.
Okay, then maybe Brian, help me then if that's...
The documents were received on the 6th of February and handed to a staff employee. Those documents were handed, based on the video that we did look at, were placed in the box. For some reason, they did not come up to the city clerk's office by the 13th. I went back and reviewed the videotape and then notified Mr. Priotti that he did turn in his documents by the due date. It was no intention, the documents just did not make it upstairs. Wasn't that they were held for a reason.
Excuse me, the only issue on this was the timing. He had so many days in order to file the appeal, and
well, we're
Brian,
hearing the appeal, so that issue is moot.
Right. Brian determined that he did meet that deadline, and therefore he granted the appeal. I mean, that's the only issue there, and it was just a document that took a couple of days to get where it needed to be. That to this issue is a non-issue. If we had denied his appeal, then that would have been an issue, but we did not, obviously.
I was originally denied it.
But you showed us that you did.
I was originally denied it, and I had to fight and send emails and...
Yeah.
You guys had to check video, and then I proved it.
Well, the issue here before us, as I understand it, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, is whether or not the City Council wishes to overturn the decision of the city manager who upheld the decision of staff to deny probationary status for this contractor. I'm looking at the work history that Mr. Priotti presents. Sales and pool service, working for a pool company as a pool technician, built swimming pools. So the background is all pools. The current permit that Mr. Priotti says he has is for a pool. Worked for the Priotti Group, managed the building of 4 houses, but by Mr. Priotti's comments, it was scheduling, estimating, coordinating between investors, realtors, and owners, but to me, it doesn't sound like construction. It sounds to me like business management, back office management. Now, I'm sure that in many construction businesses today, the owner doesn't go out and hammer nails. He sits in the back office and does what Mr. Priotti just described. I'm a little concerned that if the city is going to create a category called probationary status, it probably should have been better defined. I'm not even sure what function that status served, but since we have it, Mr. Priotti is saying that I've met it. I'm a licensed contractor. You have no complaints against my company or me as an individual. I'm inclined to go along with Mr. Lewis. I don't see the downside. As a probationary contractor, you can continue to pull permits in the private sector. When you get to the 3, the whole issue goes away. But in the meantime, I don't see why we should have that smirch on your record. That's just my opinion. Mr. McGuire, any thoughts, comments? Any further thoughts?
I am of the same opinion, but I am a little bit more cautious, I think, than that. New company, I wish you all the success, and I hope everything goes well. But I think there is a lack of experience here, and I hope it doesn't. If your appeal is overturned, I hope it doesn't come back to get us. And go ahead.
I respect that, and I can totally understand. Being a new company, you want to see the work he's done. I'm just coming in front of you guys because I fit the probationary status.
Understood.
Mr. Priotti is a resident of Palm Coast. I think that gets him at least one more point there. He's a local business.
Also, as a probationary person, you have to do something to show that you can qualify to move forward. The only way you can do that is under that category is to do something in terms of what you're trying to do now. And then if that's satisfactory, you move into the next category. To me, that's your probationary status, and you have to satisfy that. So I don't see what the problem is.
In accord with the attorney's recommendation, is there anyone in the audience who has had business dealings with Mr. Priotti who would like to speak either in his defense or against? Seeing no one. City Council?
What are you asking for?
At this point, I think it's appropriate that we either support the city manager's decision or overturn the city manager's decision. Basically, either deny probationary status or approve probationary status.
I think since we haven't really defined that term, to my understanding, and to the fact that my looking at a person going into a position for the first time, he's called probationary. And then when he's satisfied that probationary period, he moves forward. So I see no reason why Mr. Priotti can't be given that opportunity.
Would you like to offer,
No, that's not.
Was that a motion?
is that a motion?
Well, I'll take it as a motion. I'll move it as a motion.
There's a motion to overturn the manager's decision to uphold staff's decision to deny probationary status. Putting it another way, there's a motion to grant probationary status to Mr. Priotti, DBA Agua Construction. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor and Council, really not relevant to the decision at hand, but I do want to make sure, and Bo and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure everyone understands, the designation of probationary status only has to do with the NSP program.
That is correct.
That is not a designation.
Has no impact on his other contracting.
Right, so it's very limited one way or the other, but I just want to make sure that the public understands that as well as the council.
Has nothing to do with existing contracts, future contracts. That's between you and your customers.
So that I understand, maybe others have a similar concern, is by granting probationary status, Mr. Priotti and his company would be eligible to bid on one job not to exceed $15,000. Is that right?
Correct. And then once he completed that job, then you'd be off probationary status, essentially.
Oh, could be, that would be.
Right.
And Mr. Priotti, I presume your business would be enhanced by having probationary status, or do you foresee success in your company without doing this type of work under the SHIP program?
When I heard about the SHIP program, I left Palm Coast, went to Gainesville to get my construction management degree to learn how to dealings with the city.
Yeah.
I graduated, got my license, knew I fell under the probationary status,
Right.
and applied.
Right.
And then, like I said, I'm just a little concerned of, even if you look at the qualifications, it says any complaints in the prior 2 years.
It's hard to have them if you didn't have any jobs. Yeah.
So my father's complaint, 8 years ago.
Yeah, well, we've covered that ground in the sense that we want to move forward rather than to go backward, and given that we're fresh start as the terms have been used, I think it's wise to pursue that.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion to grant probationary status signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Thank you, Mr. Priotti. Best of luck.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Get to work.
Now get to work, yeah. This brings us to the consent agenda, items 9 through 13. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda?
No, sir.
Hearing no outcries, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. It's the opportunity for the public to speak on any item not on today's agenda. It could be an item raised at the most recent workshop or any other item for that matter. Please come to the podium, give us your name, and limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Public comment.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. At the workshop, you brought up this garbage can issue. Are we going to allow certain people not to have garbage cans and other people do? If it's an ordinance, it's an ordinance for everybody, like everything else. You're not specialized. If the ordinance says you got to have a garbage pail, I think that's what it should be. Not that you should go and say, listen, if somebody breaks into your bag, then you got to get a garbage pail. I don't think that's right, because then you're giving special privileges to certain people. If everybody needs a garbage pail, let it be. So.
Thank you. We'll get you an answer. Next speaker.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. I just want to know the status of the Seminole Woods Path, and how is it coming, and is it still on schedule? Thank you.
We'll get you an answer. Next speaker.
City Councilman and Attorney Reichman, Maureen Jones, and I did not thank you all last public meeting, for doing the right thing. It sort of became a council bashing session, and I apologize. That I didn't have any control over that, but I do appreciate the fact that you are looking at the property rights of an individual as a very important and sacred right, and as you you should. And the fact that you're waiting, that you've tabled this issue of Bulldog Drive, and that you are waiting until the county makes a determination is highly commendable. You have an ominous job here. You have a lot to consider. Mr. Lewis pointed out that you're taking on a lot of responsibility with 3 projects, all within a CRA district, all that feed into a wetlands. And so I did want to thank you for waiting until the county makes a determination. I have recommended to the county, and I'd like to recommend to you all, at some point before a decision is made, that we sit down at a table and we determine, or we try to discuss some of the issues. My name is Maureen Jones. I apologize. I just did not represent myself.
You did.
And I represent Gus and Colleen Asram. And according to what we can determine, there's a swath of land that the Asrams own, and apparently from last week, you're saying there's a swath of land that you have controlled. If you look at your 2004 master plan of Bulldog Drive, it does show that there's a 20-foot right-of-way, 25-foot right-of-way on Bulldog. So there's a lot of different variations or different opinions that I think if we all stepped back and looked at potentially how the issue with the Asrams in the city could be resolved, I think it might be helpful if we, one, tried to work out the ownership issue, and then 2, currently, I was just informed this morning that and I was expecting this because that you currently have had flooding over on the school board property, but I was informed this morning that there's now flooding onto the Asrams property. So that's a new issue for you, but I wanted to at least thank you for doing the right thing last week or 2 weeks ago. And I do, I put myself in your shoes.
15 seconds, Councilor.
Okay, I put myself in your shoes, and I thought that can't be fun. You're doing this for the right reasons, and but all in all, I would like you to put yourself in the Asram shoes and realize from the year 2000 to the year 2014 can't be fun for them either. So I think it's time to resolve this issue, and you move along with your project and they move along with their life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello again, my name is Mary Ellen Lent, and I work for the Asrams. Notwithstanding what their attorney just said, I actually have pictures of the flooding that occurred last night, and it's fairly serious, and I think that if there was some way to show them, I think it would be important for you all to look at how serious the flooding is. And I want to say the contractor ran right in first thing this morning, started pumping out, but part of this is because you're aggressively doing construction well into the properties on either side of us for the future. In addition, I have been in your shoes, gentlemen, okay? I have been an elected official. And after listening to last week's workshop, I have to say that there was a lot of, Mr. Landon gets a lot of leeway to obfuscate and confuse. And he brought up a lot of issues that were basically putting into question what the ASRAM's attorney was saying, such as she compiled documents. No, she didn't. They're on the public record that way. You hit print on this resolution, and all this backup shows up, such as my real concern is the way you're treating this issue. This is a man's livelihood, that he's worked for all his life, and it was a joke. There was giggling. There were comments that were inappropriate. There was concerns about due diligence because someone kept saying, "Where's Flintstone Court? Where's Flintstone Court?" Well, sir, all of you, it's on the list. Did you do your homework? Because I found it. So I think it's time that, number one, the people we elect stop letting their employee, our employee, the city manager, treat the people of this city with disdain, and that the rest of you don't get into the pack mentality every time he does it. Now, I'd very much appreciate if we could look at the pictures of what occurred last night, because this was not the worst rain we're going to be seeing this season, and you know it. Is there any way that my pictures can be displayed?
Not in the time allotted. Why don't, if you like, stay around till the end of public comment and City Council will look at them.
Okay, and then in the meantime, that I'm going to go on the record that I will be turning this in to the clerk to put, I want this officially
That
attached
would be
to the
fine.
documents.
Or the copies thereof if you don't want to give up the flash drive.
We've got copies.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Morning, everyone. Dennis McDonald for the record. I came here this morning to talk, to essentially talk about one thing, and that would be the new City Hall. And what I want to do is I want to tie together some information that was brought forward last night at the County Commission meeting. And we had the economic development people there giving a presentation. And what we learned was that we're still the second highest unemployment rate in the state of Florida. We're exceeding 9%, and I think a lot of those numbers are cooked, to be quite honest with you. I think a lot of the people that are unemployed here are unemployed because they've pretty much given up, and they're at a point in life when they can just kind of kick back and retire. So you take those people out of the mix. But here's where I want to go. We found out that what was proposed about a month ago was $6.9 million for a new city hall. 5.8 was going to come from the money going to be repaid from the CRA, and 1.1 was, my understanding, was going to come from the building department fund. So I want to give you some back history. Back in 2010, when the foreclosure was started on the building that you're presently in at City Marketplace, I looked into that building. I followed that foreclosure. I actually talked to the attorney who foreclosed it from Sunrise, Florida, and I have a number of interesting facts on that building. But the most important thing here is that there's 122,000 square feet that were in that building that were for sale from the Fed. It originally went on the market at $6.5 million. And as you know, it sold for $2.9 million just recently. So consequently, gentlemen, what happened here is you're in a building right now that just sold for $24 per foot. And yet what we're going to do is we're going to go out, and we're going to go out in the middle of the barrens, as I like to call it, and spend $215 a foot, and we're not even beginning to make a dent in the size of the building that you want to make. So essentially what we're talking about is 9 times the value is what you're going to go out and spend for us. And we've got the second highest unemployment rate in the state of Florida. I'm really concerned about what's going on here, gentlemen. I'm here concerned about what's going on for the taxpayers in this county and this city, both at this level and at the county level, and not understanding the duress that we're under. So one of the interesting comments that Mr. Landon made the other day in his presentation was, we've made an assurance, a guarantee, that we're not going to take dollars out of the people's tax dollars today. And we do that the way we do that is, number one, that the office space is a fixed amount. Gentlemen, I don't believe any of this. This is just more sleight of hand. We're in trouble here, and the taxpayers are the ones that are picking up the tab for this. That $5.8 million came out of the general fund, and that $5.8 million should go back into the general fund because you took millions of dollars out of the utility fund to
15 seconds, please.
To fund utility improvements on Old Kings, and you've got another $1 million that you just took out for the Palm Coast Parkway expansion. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, go back to council. First question had to do with garbage cans. Do we require them? Do we not require them?
No, we do not require a garbage can. We require the garbage to be either in a can or a bag. The issue is that if you put out a can or a bag, it doesn't matter which one, and if the garbage doesn't stay in there because critters get into it, then we need to take enforcement action. It's not a matter of what they have, a bag or a can. It has to do, because there are some cans that people put out that end up getting tipped over and trash blown throughout the neighborhood. And so that's the issue. And if people have a container that the trash stays within, then obviously we take no action. That's exactly the way it's supposed to work. So there isn't any trash or can requirement. It just has to stay contained, either in a trash.
It's the end result that we're seeking, that the garbage not be strewn about. And for the benefit of the public, if we find there is a problem, whether it be from a can, from a bag, from a cardboard box, from a recycle bin, from a whatever, we're going to pursue.
Then we're going to work with that resident to find solutions so that they can keep their trash where it belongs.
Okay. Council?
Your Honor, if I may.
Please.
Mr. Landon, can Waste Pro give the citizens a time when they will probably pick up their trash? Because if you put your trash out the night before and Waste Pro don't come by until 11 to 12 o'clock, then you know it's been out there for more than 12 hours, regardless of what kind of container it is in. But it seems if the trash collector could tell the citizens, okay, we're going to hit your street between 8 and 9, and narrow the time down, then maybe we can avoid some of this where people put their trash out well in advance of when the truck's going to come.
The goal is consistency in having them come approximately the same time. I will tell you that though the first pickup of the week there's more trash than the second pickup of the week. A lot of people don't even use that second one. So the second pickup, they're going to run faster, and so they're probably going to get there a little earlier. But as long as they're consistent, if they're not, Mr. McGuire, if anybody says that they come, 8 o'clock one day and 12 o'clock the next time, let us know, because we will talk to Waste Pro and have the driver work out a consistent schedule.
Who in the city should be notified?
Diane Trino, contract manager, is the one that works with Waste Pro directly.
Okay.
Seminole Woods Path project update.
Seminole Woods Path project, we had to pull our crew off waiting for FP&L to relocate the poles. I don't know if FP&L is finished, but I know they've definitely been out there working. And as soon as the poles are moved, our crews will come back and finish this first phase. We also already are prepared to install the crossing, the signalized crossing at State Road 100, so that when the path gets to State Road 100, the crossing will occur also. And then later on this year, we'll be extending it further south as part of our plan.
Thank you. Council will stick around for a couple seconds after we adjourn, look at the photos. Unless, Virginia, would it be easy to print out copies from the photos?
I can email them to you.
Why don't you do that?
Once I get them
Why don't you do that?
from Maryland.
Why don't we do that?
Excuse me, I don't think you'll, I need to explain to you what you're looking at.
We'll give it some thought. Okay. That concludes public comment. Discussion by city council of matters not on the agenda.
What about the city hall, you going to address that?
No?
There was no question.
Nothing?
Nothing? Mr. Lewis?
Nothing.
Mr. Di Lorenzo? I have one question. I've had a couple of communications recently about right-on-red turns at Memorial Medical Parkway at the hospital. Are we making any progress in redesigning, re-signalizing, re-signing, relocating stop lines?
Well, we have received approval from FDOT, because it's a state highway, it takes their approval, to install a right turn arrow so that when the green light for coming out of the hospital, when that light is green, then people would have a green arrow, would not have to stop on red. The only time it would be red for that right turn into the hospital if you're westbound would be when the left turn arrow for eastbound is obviously, so because those would be a conflict. We have submitted a proposed design to FDOT, and they have not gotten back to us on that. I have recently asked our traffic engineer to contact them and see if we can't expedite that forward.
I'd appreciate that. Discussion by the city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing.
And I was going to look for some guidance in terms of viewing these photographs during the meeting, after the meeting.
Well, that would be your discretion, Mr. Mayor,
Is there any-
and council. This is not, as I understand it, they were submitted by a citizen, not for the purposes of an appeal or a quasi-judicial matter, but under citizen comments. Certainly, if you want to review these and receive explanation from her, you need to do that by yourself, so there would not be a sunshine violation, that sort of thing. If you wish, on the other hand, if you wish for the council as a whole to receive input or explanation, it would be more appropriate to do it during obviously a noticed sunshine meeting.
Okay.
That's really the legal issue involved.
Anything else, Mr. Reichman?
Nothing further to report specifically.
Discussion by city manager not on the agenda.
Yeah, just a lot, once again, construction going on. Yesterday's rain was very difficult. I want to state for the ASRAMs that our contractor is responsible for making sure that their property is not flooded and adversely affected by the construction project. Mother Nature sometimes is difficult to control. But we will be having a conversation with the contractor to make sure that the rain doesn't hit or go off and flood other people's property. They are in the middle of construction. What you see now is not the end result, so once the project is complete, this problem should no longer occur. In the meantime, the contractor is responsible. And if that means having pumps out there and pumping and making sure that it goes to the right place, then they will need to do that, and we'll be in contact with them to make sure that we don't adversely impact people's property during construction. Palm Coast Parkway, as you can see, is moving along. And have not heard any complaints about it so far, which is a good thing. I actually heard a compliment through the mayor that the way they've striped it to keep 2 lanes going through as much as possible. We are having some nighttime 1-lane closures. I want to point out for both on Bulldog Drive and Palm Coast Parkway that we are seeing some work at night. We're seeing some work on weekends to try to move these things forward, because the sooner we can get out of there and get rid of the inconvenience of construction, the better. And we are pushing the contractors hard to do that. Our Weir project is moving along. The bridge rehab project, I've heard positive things about that progress. The Long Creek We've run into some challenges with soil types, et cetera, with detention ponds, but that project also is moving forward nicely. So kind of an update on a number of things happening in a variety of neighborhoods right now. That's all I have, Mayor.
Council members, we're going to adjourn the meeting, hopefully. Anybody who wishes to stay afterward and view those photographs is welcome to do so. We will not have any discussion, simply viewing some photographs. The individual is welcome to contact us individually if she wants further commentary. Mr. Vice Mayor?
I move we adjourn.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Okay.